Of course, we've just celebrated Heritage Day, and far too often Africans have many of their stories told for them by others. But the team at Heritage Publishers, yes, they are changing all of that. They recently launched a series of books that explores events that shaped our country. There you see them right on screen now. Now, the first title in the series tells the story of the Battle of Mhlathuze River, which has its bicentennial anniversary next year, 2018. Approximately 200 years ago now, this battle was the catalyst for the relocation of the amaNdwandwe to northern Swaziland and eastern Mpumalanga. It also provided the impetus for the founding of the amaShangaan nation, as well as the Ngoni under Zwangendaba. In its aftermath, Shaka consolidated his authority over many of the abaNguni clans in the present day. Now, we are joined in studio by Terence Ball, who is the publisher at Heritage Publishers. A very good morning to you, Terence. Certainly a mouthful and a whole range of books that you have here. Nice to have you with us. Just talk us through this idea of heritage.
Well, I've had the great privilege of traveling through Southern Africa, rural Southern Africa, for the last 30, 40 years, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland and South Africa. And in about 2013, I met with three friends of mine in rural Vuwani, a little village in the northeastern part of Limpopo, which is in the news for all the wrong reasons at the moment.
Yeah, that's true.
Two of them were Chitsonga speakers, one of amaShangaan heritage, one of Vatsonga, and a third of Tshivenda speaker, Konanani Mativa. And we were talking about the name that Vuwani used to have 100 years ago, which was Lokati van Taban. For those who are interested, it was a North Sotho mispronunciation of Davana, Makado's brother. But I asked them who Taban was, and they couldn't answer, and I teased them by saying, it surprises me that people who are so respectful of the ancestors know so little about what those ancestors did. And Konanandi said to me, you know, Terence, you are right to scold us, but you know something of all of our languages, you know a lot of the history of our people, you know publishing, and you understand what is happening in our schools. Why don't you do something about it? So that's how the series started. Now,
the first edition is the Battle of Mhlathuze River, and it's, of course, a story that's part of our narrative, and it's been told time and time again. What's different in this version?
I think what is very different in this version is that, as you'll see, each of the books is quite thin, and that's done deliberately in order not to appear daunting to our young readers of English who have another language as their mother tongue. They're well illustrated, so 10,000 words. Each story is restricted to 10,000 words, 48 pages, and most of the stories are told through the mechanism of the traditional storyteller, which is a craft that has really died, very sadly. I think most people who tell stories in the old traditional way now are actors playing that role. And we started with Mhlathuze River because, as you said in the introduction, it founded the amaShangaan nation. It was a battle fought between Zwide Kalanga and Kosigakulu of the amaNdwandwe, Shoshangaan Kanxumalo and Zwangendaba Kajele. And Mzilikazi Kamashobani at that time was fighting on the side of Shaka against his grandfather. Zwide Kalanga was Mzilikazi's grandfather. And then came the split. Following the battle, in the aftermath of the battle, obviously there was a fallout between Mzilikazi and Shaka, which meant that Mzilikazi had to flee from KwaZulu-Natal, stopping in Ermelo, Middelburg, Pretoria, what we now know as Pretoria, long before it was that.
It's interesting because my son is in grade 10 and he's going through this sort of history right now, and I'm kind of sharing that journey with him a little bit. But of course, there are many calls in South Africa now for the decolonization of education and bringing these stories and accurately retelling these stories to our young people. How do you view that, and do you support that idea?
I absolutely support that idea. There's so much talk about social cohesion. Well, how better to socially cohese our society, if you like, than to give them some words in all of our indigenous languages and give them some knowledge of their own ancestry, their own ancestors, and those of other South Africans. You know, if I go to Kalo Kofi Mvaba and I greet somebody in Tshivenda, I'll be asked if I've just come in from the Congo. Nobody there would recognize Tshivenda as a South African language. And we have to deal with that issue. We need to know who Dibanyika was. We need to know who Makoma was, etc., etc.
Now, you've serialized this. Tell us the idea of releasing what's really the great works of South Africa in a series.
Well, you know, all of these stories, as different as they may seem on the surface, do have some linkages, and that's important. As you know, we started with the Mhlathuze River. I then decided that we should look at the story of the amaShangaan. So we started with Shoshangaan, who was at the battle. We cover his son Muzila and Muzila's son Gugunyane. We then looked at Mzlikazi Kamashobane, and I was about to publish those books, and I thought to myself, I may well be criticized for producing a history of the abaNguni rather than an attempt to begin to put together a fairly comprehensive list of titles covering all South Africans. And so I decided to include some histories of the Musuthu, of the Bapedi, of the Vavenda, and so on. And of course the series will grow. We haven't covered all of South Africa's people, not by a long way.
I want that leads me to the next one. There's some real interesting, for instance, the creation story of the San Bushman, and of course we all know the story around Hottentotsgot and these sorts of things. These are these to follow? You're going to follow up and try and retell those stories in a sort of, call it, a way that young people can interact and understand?
Absolutely. I have a list of 80 titles currently, either people or events whose stories we would like to tell. And I'm deeply privileged to be working with the SAN Council and the SAN Institute to produce the first major bilingual dictionary in Nguni, Qung and Kwedam, English, in about 80 years. And certainly stories of the SAN must follow.
The importance of us telling our own stories. How do you view that importance?
I think it is critically important, especially when these stories are being lost. And if we talk to most people about the siege of Leboho, even the amaNdwandwe themselves, they would know about it, but possibly they wouldn't have as much knowledge as they should have. And it's a deeply interesting story. If we are going to try and bring the country together, as I say, I believe that we need to become a more multilingual society, and I also believe that we need to know something of our ancestors and those of other South Africans. So it is a mission for me.
Heritage Day is just finished and heritage publishers are here. Are we really in touch and interested in our heritage in South Africa, and each other for that matter?
It's a difficult one to answer. I mean, superficially it would seem not, but the fact of the matter is I'm glad that there has been a very positive response to the series. It's also quite a sensitive issue. I think it's something that people would not want to own up to, i.e. I have no interest in my ancestors. Very unlikely that people would make that statement. So we have to explore that, and we have to strengthen their understanding of the past. And I'm convinced that with a greater understanding of the past, will come a greater respect for it. And I hope that people will visit places that are mentioned in these books on their holidays.
I think there's international benchmarks where we see that kind of thing has helped with healing processes, where you go and reflect and understand the past so you can collectively go forward. What's next for heritage publishers?
Well, as I mentioned, we have 80 titles, and if the series is successful, if it does take on, there will be no end to it, quite literally, because we have a rich history across all of our provinces. There are so many stories to tell, and interesting stories. So I hope, obviously, to be able to expand the series to become more representative of all South Africa's people. And I mean, I think I ought to say that I heard recently, and I'm very pleased about it, that the Library of Congress in the USA has purchased and catalogued the entire series. So for the first time, to my knowledge, a comprehensive series of the story of South Africa's ancestors is being made available to some degree to an international audience.
That's fantastic, incredible work that you've done, that you're doing, Terence. Terence Ball is the publisher at Heritage Publishers, and they are truly telling the story of South Africa, our true history. If you don't know where you're coming from, you will never know where you are going. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Very interesting. I enjoyed that.